Chapter 7. Benefiting the living and their dying dependents. At that time, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva Mahasattva addressed the Buddha saying, Bhagavat, I have observed sentient beings in Jambudvipa. As soon as a thought or an idea is instigated, their driving force is nothing but sin. Even if they have gained some temporary relief from their sinful sufferings, along with a few benefits, soon after they will lose their original wish of seeking liberation. When they encounter unfavorable conditions, they fall back into their habitual sinful karmic ways and let evil thoughts grow one after another. These sentient beings are like those walking in a muddy swamp. Not only is each step difficult, they are also carrying heavy burdens on their backs. The deeper they are trapped, the heavier the burdens feel, until finally they become stranded in the swamp, which is dark, deep, and bottomless. If they are fortunate to encounter a knowledgeable mentor who can take away part of the load or the entire load that the sentient beings are burdened with, due to the great power of this knowledgeable mentor, they will be guided to stabilize their foothold and come back to a safe ground. Once stepping onto the safe path, they should make profound self-reflections to understand how they have come to travel upon this evil path. In addition, they should make a vow that they must never make the absurd choice to walk the dangerous path again, nor repeat the experience of such sinful evil suffering. Bhagavat, these sentient beings who are habitually inclined toward evil will always make some petty evil suddenly grow into an infinite and enormous one. Hence, while they are on the verge of death, their parents and other dependents should help to gather some capital for them so they can have resources to meet the challenges of their journey ahead. The much needed capital can be replenished by performing the following deeds. Hang banners, flags, umbrellas, and canopies that glorify the merits of the Buddha. Light candles or lamps that symbolize the wisdom of the Buddha. Read the Buddha Sutra aloud to get direction and guidance. Make reverent offerings to the images of the Buddhas and the holy ones, such as Bodhisattvas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and Arhats, to express desire for blessing. Or chant the names of the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and Pratyeka Buddhas to create a channel of communication. The reading and chanting should be done in front of the dying ones, such as to reach their ears and their minds. If these dying persons committed many evil deeds in their previous lives and in their current lifetime, then the deeds will magnetize the three evil realms to become their future objective realities. However, when their relatives and dependents perform the Buddhist rites, so that the meritorious seeds of Bodhi are planted, their uncountable grave sins will be eradicated. If the relatives and dependents of the newly deceased want to do more for the deceased, they can presently perform additional meritorious deeds within 49 days of the death, so that the deceased will forever stay away from the evil past and reincarnate in human or celestial realms to enjoy superb happiness. At the same time, those relatives and dependents who have performed the merits will also gain infinite benefits for themselves. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva continued, addressing the Buddha. Today, in front of you, Bhagavat, Devas, Nagas, and the other 6 deities in the 8 divisions, and in front of humans and non-humans, I am speaking out to advise all beings in Jambudvipa around the time of death. Do not slaughter animals as sacrificial offerings, nor seek refuge from ghosts and gods. Why? Those measures will not give the dying ones the slightest help or benefit. Instead, more sinful suffering causes and conditions would be produced, which would increase the sinful deeds of the dying ones. Those beings of the present and future that have gained enough merits should be reborn among human or celestial paths to enjoy superb, intriguing happiness. But if their relatives have committed evil deeds of killing animals and worshiping ghosts and gods on their behalf, the deceased in their invisible in-between state will be burdened with the task of arguing against such good intentions and defending their innocence, and their destinies of going to blissful places will thus be delayed. Besides, most newly deceased have not performed many virtuous deeds while alive, nor have they cultivated any virtuous roots to rely on. Based on their evil deeds, they would certainly fall into the evil past. Yet on the way, more burdensome loads of sins are added because of what the living ones have done for them. How can the living ones be so hard-hearted as to make them entangled with more evils? It is like a person who has traveled a long distance on foot for 3 days without any food, carrying a load of over 100 pounds on his back, and he is about to collapse at any moment. Then along comes another person who adds more to the load on his back. Regardless how light the new load is, to the traveler it is like adding a heavy load, which will incapacitate him to take another step and trap him into more helplessness and fatigue. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva continued, Bhagavad, I have closely observed sentient beings in Jambudvipa. If they can follow the teachings of the Buddhas to perform some virtuous deeds, regardless how small the deeds are, even as small as a strand of hair, a droplet of water, a grain of sand, or a particle of dust, this will bring benefits that they can reap in full. As these words were said, there was a reputable elder named Great Eloquence, who was a true Bodhisattva Mahasattva. He had been realizing and validating the Dharma of no birth for a long time. He could transform himself into any identity he wished in order to enlighten and rescue all beings in the 10 directions. During this assembly, this Mahasattva appeared as an elder. He reverently brought his palms together, made obeisance, and asked Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, O Mahasattva, is it really true that the deceased beings in southern Jambudvipa will gain great benefits and emancipation if their close relatives and dependents cultivate many meritorious deeds, even providing a fasting meal as virtuous causes on their behalf? Ksitigarbha answered, Elder, with the empowerment of the Buddha's miraculous strength, I will briefly discuss the matter for the sake of all sentient beings, of the present and future. Elder, if sentient beings of the present and future, on the day of their deaths, regardless of being sinful or not, would hear the name of one Buddha or one Bodhisattva, or one Pratyeka Buddha, they will be liberated from suffering and gain happiness. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva continued, if any men or women who, while alive, have not planted any virtuous seeds, nor made any effort to be connected with the Buddha, but instead committed many sinful deeds upon their deaths, should their close relatives and dependents cultivate meritorious deeds to increase their bliss and benefits, 1 out of 7 parts of the bliss and benefits will go to the deceased, while the remaining 6 parts will go to the living ones who have participated in the meritorious deeds. Therefore, all virtuous men and virtuous women of the present and future should cultivate meritorious deeds for themselves in order to harvest every bit of the merits. The great ghost of impermanence always arrives unexpectedly. With his destructive power, he can turn whatever we have previously considered permanent into bubbles soon to disappear. The sudden change will be most difficult for the newly deceased to adapt to the invisible in-between state. The invisible in-between entity wanders around in total darkness, unable to foresee whether there is a blissful future ahead or a harsh, sinful one. Hence, for the next 49 days after death, the entity exists like a deaf and muddled being, not knowing where to go and feeling extremely frightened, lost, and anxious. Before the final destiny is determined, this invisible, in-between entity might appear at various places and must defend and argue with great fear and distress about his karmic deeds. Once the decision is made about where to be reborn according to one's previous deeds, the entity must comply, and there is no chance for refusal. If the destination is one of the lower realms, how frantic and worried he would be. Indeed, before the deceased have a firm place to go, from moment to moment within these 49 days, they are desperately longing for the blood relatives and dependents to urgently cultivate some blessings and provide virtuous strength for their sake in order to rescue them from falling into the evil realms. Because after these 49 days, their destinations are decided, and they can only comply with the consequences of their karma. Once reincarnation takes place, the connections with their previous lives are severed, leaving no memories of them. If the deceased are loaded with sinful deeds, with no help from their relatives and dependents, then for the next 100,000 years, they will suffer severe pain and harm without a date for acquittal. If the deceased have committed the 5 unremitting sins that will lead them to fall into the great hell, after thousands and tens of thousands of kappas have passed, they will remain in the hell to endure numerous sufferings. Furthermore, elder, if the relatives and dependents of the sinful deceased person want to cultivate bliss, they can offer a fast in honor of the 3 jewels to acquire capital for the journey as the deceased proceed on the karmic path. While preparing the meal and cleaning up after the meal, the entire process should be observed with great reverence. Do not roughly and wastefully discard anything on the ground, such as the water after rinsing the rice or the unwanted vegetable leaves. No one should consume any food before making offerings to the 3 jewels first. Disobeying the above instructions or practicing the rite without care and respect will cause the deceased to receive no benefits. Furthermore, if during the entire process the relatives can safeguard their minds without distraction and make offerings to the Buddha and Sangha first, then the deceased will gain 1 part of the merits among a total of 7 parts. The relatives engaging in the process of offering will gain the other 6 parts. Therefore, elder, if sentient beings in Jambudvipa are willing to perform a fast, as offering with utmost sincerity to honor the Buddha and Sangha on behalf of their deceased parents and relatives, both the living and the deceased will obtain benefits. As these words were said in the palace of Trias Trimsha heaven, the ghosts and gods of Jambudvipa, numbering 1 quadrillion Nayuta, all made vows to pursue boundless enlightenment. The elder, great eloquence, made obeisance to Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva and withdrew.